I sometimes talk to the largest companies in the world, and they tell me we deploy once a quarter, or we deploy a couple times a quarter.
Not surprised.
And by the way, not the quarter of Black Friday, because that's like the code freeze quarter.
You cannot sell experience. You cannot sell experience. You cannot tell, hey,
That's right.
I give you a good experience. It's more like experience it.
The frameworks that were in vogue at the time, they were pushing for this idea of a static web. It sounds a little crazy in retrospect, right? I can give you some examples.
No, for me it was.
I have horror stories from customers.
Me too, I guess. Hello, everyone. Today I have a special guest with me. I have Guillermo. And, at Prismic, we really love what Next is doing and what Vercel is doing. And I have to tell you, Guillermo, that a third of our revenue comes from people that use Next.js.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
That's a big number. And we thought, how about we bring you back?
Thanks for the data point, by the way.
Sorry?
Thanks for the data point.
Yeah.
Awesome to know.
Yeah, and it has been a long time since we talked here last time.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, we need to refresh that kind of discussion. And there's so much that happened since that time. And the word in Vercel, you mentioned offline that you were like, COVID happened. Vercel grew a lot, from that conversation. But I think that you still have this same sharp vision about things. And I think it makes sense to talk about all that.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, first let's start with the big news. You raised your Series D, is it?
E,
yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that so that we get that into the context?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Vercel has experienced tremendous growth, and it's been really explosive ever since I was last here, which is really funny. The company was called Zeit at the time.
I remember, yeah.
We relaunched it as Vercel, and that was during COVID. And then every single year since then, we've just been seeing like this rocket ship of a growth story, predicated on the rise of what we call now the front-end cloud, which is this decoupled way of building applications where if you choose Vercel and frameworks like Next.js, you start building the customer experience and then working backwards into your backends, right? So the cloud becomes this really composable set of Lego bricks that you can assemble to create amazing experiences for your customers. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that we're a cloud that is obsessed with customer experience. When you go to a website that's built with Vercel and Prismic or other services, you should see that it's faster, more personalized, etc. And the time to market is like vastly accelerated. So
yeah, I saw an interview of Sam Altman, who was talking about that we have to ship every day, or like that kind of very tight iterations. I mean, at the time we used to talk about iterations of 2 weeks. Now iterations are so much shorter, and you need to kind of experiment with the customer, and you enable that as well.
And that's a great example.
Developer experience, right?
So OpenAI.com itself is built with Next and Vercel.
Yeah.
And I, as a visitor of the internet, as a user of the internet, I'm impressed with like the shipping cadence. Like every single day, there seems to be like new content, new pages, new documentation, whatever. So enabling companies to move fast actually, in some way, ended up being even more important than the thing that was, in some ways, like even more near and dear to my heart, which is like the technology itself, like making the web really fast. In fact, when we raised our Series C, I think we called it Make the Web Faster. And we kind of joked that it was like make the web faster. So it's both like make it really fast and also the process of building it, making it really, really iterative and efficient.
And now you're more into them making the web.
So it's interesting. I think over the as we've gone more upmarket and we've gotten to help bigger companies, they kind of are burnt out on hearing from vendors that there's like a silver bullet to like speed up things into the stratosphere and like we'll take you to space overnight. They know that software is this iterative journey in that you're constantly innovative and launching and relaunching and expanding and acquiring and merging. And I think providing the platform that accelerates that iteration velocity is more valuable than a point solution that says like, oh, I'll improve your time to first byte with this magic CDN.
So it's very funny. And I mean, like, it shows also how much yourself you grew through. And you said it yourself, like you were like about the faster, and now you're like do the web, build the web. And I believe that we have also as technical founders to update our vision about what's important, right? Because I mean, we come from technology and we're obsessed and very fascinated by technology.
Totally.
We need to understand. And now you're very much like customer journey.
Totally.
And I guess doing stuff, it's easy now, right?
Yeah.
With GenAI and everything that's happening, doing stuff is very easy. Doing stuff that matters to the customer,
Totally.
that is hard.
Yeah, and so to circle it back to the Series E, we raised $250 million in what is honestly for software a very interesting time, a very interesting market. But we've had the fortune that by powering a lot of the new innovative areas of software, for example, we power a lot of the GenAI companies, whether it's video generation or image generation or chatbots. A lot of those front ends are powered by Next.js and Vercel. In fact, ChatGPT itself is built on Next.js. So we kind of found ourselves at the right time in the right place because we had been building all this technology for what we would call a more dynamic web. In fact, one of the things I appreciate about you is that last time I was here, and this is like 4 or 5 years ago, the web was kind of the vision for the web. There was a fork in the road. Is it going to be static or is it going to be dynamic? I don't even remember this, but like the frameworks that were in vogue at the time, they were pushing for this idea of a static web. And it sounds a little crazy in retrospect, right? Because like now we're talking about Gen AI and like generating UI and pages on demand for every visitor.
Yes.
It's turned the opposite, right?
It was a fight.
But it was a fight.
Everyone, like, and that was when which, like, we should not misunderstand what I'm going to say, but there were Gatsby and all this, like, oh, let's build it static. And I was like, no, it doesn't make any sense. And like, it cannot be this way. But we learned some stuff of like extreme speed.
I always exactly that. I always say, you know, from every competitor you have, from every feedback that you get from the community and the ecosystem, there's always a nugget of wisdom and truth. And with the static sort of detour of the web, we learned that some static,
call it detour. I like
for a lot of companies it was. For a lot of companies it was. I can give you some examples.
For me it was.
I have horror stories from customers.
Me too, I guess. But anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, the key knowledge there, which you already kind of alluded to, is there is a speed guarantee of statically optimizing a page.
Right. Yes.
That is absolutely incredible. And now we've kind of gone full circle and like we help customers statically optimize portions of the page.
Portions, right?
That they can still sort of assemble dynamically. So in the end, what really won out is that the customer workload is incredibly complex, sophisticated, dynamic, especially as you get to like more enterprise solutions. But also the fact that the need for speed is definitely there, and that there's some static optimization techniques that can get you there.
Yeah, and so you're talking about dynamic web, and you talked about the website of OpenAI and how they always produce something new and add more content to the website. And I think that, as I was saying, that doing stuff is not hard. Is, you know, like producing more is so much easy now. Like and you know, GenAI and frameworks and APIs and everything is there to help you start up something and build it and progress. But the customer experience is the hard thing to manage. And
totally,
I was talking to my investors and was like, well, we only see very promising AI companies, GenAI companies all the time. The problem is they have a lot of users, but a lot of churn as well at the same time, and they don't know what to think about it. It's like their framework of understanding which startup is going to be interesting and which is not. It's unclear because there's so much churn. Because yes, the idea is very promising, but will the customer understand it? Like, look, even OpenAI and ChatGPT. A lot of people were like, was hype and people were trying and all, but at some point they fall back into their habits, and a lot of people actually abandon ChatGPT because okay, well, I have a task, I have to copy paste into another thing and then copy paste back into and provide it all the context. I have to provide it with so much context so that it works. Yeah. Now you need a tool on your process. Whatever you're using, are you using Slack, Notion, Vercel, Prismic? You need something that already understands the context. I don't have to explain it anything, and then it gives me that intelligence inside the tool. And I think for doing that right, you need to iterate.
Yeah.
You need to kind of forget about deployment. Like you just like shipping stuff, right? And that's
yeah, you need depth to the customer experience, I think. So what we see, to your point about this overnight successes that come out, is companies that produce a great model will immediately garner they'll summon the universe's attention onto their website. In fact, this is probably why so many of these companies are launching on Vercel, because I think we did a case study with one Pika AI where they got 800,000 signups in 48 hours when they launched their web UI. They were previously a Discord bot. And even yesterday, I saw another Vercel customer, a company called Luma. They launched a Sora-like model for video generation. It's freaking amazing. I used it myself. To your point, though, in order to build a long-term business, you will have to create a relationship with the customer that is long-lived. Like, you will have to become like the Adobes of the world, right? Like, you have to build a generational company that provides multiple products, a comprehensive platform, more tools.
They are impressive to be relevant for so long.
Yeah,
the
it's
Adobe,
absolutely incredible.
How on earth they could stay relevant for so long?
And even Microsoft, to that point, right? Like they are somehow now at the forefront of this, but they've been at the forefront of a lot of other.
And everyone was saying like Microsoft's dead. Microsoft's dead. You remember that time?
Totally.
But look how relevant. It cannot be more relevant.
You have to keep grinding.
Yeah, absolutely. So to that, so I would like so there's so many different ways we can take this kind of discussion, but it's fun. I mean, I would like to. So we're talking about how Vercel and deliver that kind of experience, iteration and dev experience, right? And you're calling like what is it? The cloud of the front end, right? The front end cloud, right?
That's right.
Can you tell us more about the cases of where? So just for the story, there are two things that I would like to tell here first.
Yeah.
There's one thing that you told me, because you brought up competitors, and we have to learn something from every competitor.
Yep.
And there's a time that we were chatting, probably 4 years ago, and I told you like, what do you think about competitors and all? Like, you told me like, I'm the opposite of paranoia. Didn't you tell me that? And you told me because I feel that everyone is playing to my favor, and it's so good. I have to admit it. I don't admit beneficial advices often, but this one is so good because, actually, everyone is playing for you. Like sometimes, like we have these competitors around, okay, and they start playing our story of like, oh, we want to break the website into sections, like we have sliced it and all of that. And before I was like, oh, angry, like why you're copying? And like, no. They opened the market for us because we are so tiny compared to WordPress and so tiny compared to the number of websites are out there. Well, totally. Hell yes, come in and tell the people that we have to break that because you're helping me in my story, and that's so great, right?
Yeah, the idea even of the front-end cloud is predicated on a couple things. Number one, there is a front-end framework, Next.js, but we support others like SvelteKit, Remix, Nuxt, etc. And then there is infrastructure. And Next.js is open source, and the infrastructure is proprietary, global in nature, very much like AWS. Really, like that's the core of our business. Is we built an AWS-like cloud. Interestingly, and I think this is something of a bit of a paradox, especially for engineers. There are companies like Snowflake and Datadog that do not own any hardware. They have clouds in their own right, but they sit on top of sort of, let's call it like commodity infrastructure, like AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. And that's very much like how we're conceiving our front-end cloud. I want you to come to Vercel and deploy a great experience on the internet and not have to worry about that low-level configuration of the cloud. And in order for me to automate that, and that's where the comment around like sort of playing into this sort of theory comes in, is I need to somehow arrange a framework that then when it gets deployed to the cloud can have certain kinds of optimizations, can have certain kinds of automations. And I feel like the front end is an awesome area to play in because sure, you could create infrastructure by yourself on AWS. But for example, in order for Vercel to do that, we need to maintain 20 global Kubernetes clusters. And sometimes customers come to me and they say like, oh, like, yeah, I'm using Kubernetes. And I was like, so are we. Like, we actually write the underlying infrastructure that is global in nature so that we're everywhere in the world, close to your visitors. We have global failover and automated reliability, et cetera. So I'm basically taking away all of the responsibility of managing that front-end workload.
And that is by being knowledgeable of the framework, right?
Yeah, so, and we're very transparent about this. So there is the inspiration for this was sort of how compilers work. So compilers take source, and then they build sort of like an intermediate representation, and then they output to some backend implementation of what is the architecture and operating system that I'm targeting. This is kind of like how modern compiler toolchains work, like right. LLVM. So Vercel is kind of building like LLVM for the cloud. And the input can be multiple programming languages. Actually, LLVM supports many.
Yeah.
So it can ingest Next.js, and it can output to the instruction set of the low-level AWS primitives. Mm. And what's really cool is even Vercel itself is not locked into AWS long-term. Like right now, we actually chose AWS, and I'm very transparent about this because they're like freaking phenomenal. Their reliability and security is world-class. So when we chose them, I was like, okay, very happy to like sort of
offload,
give best-in-class primitives to my customers. Mm-hmm. Like I'm basically doing, okay, like in the snap of a finger, I can go and say, I will give you the most optimal infrastructure in the world according to the needs that I'm analyzing in this application. And this kind of, I learned, or my inspiration really was that I found myself in so many other environments and previous companies where the needs of the applications were changing so fast that the bottleneck was actually becoming that internal infrastructure team inside the company that had all these scars in good intent. In these teams, these are the heroes of the companies, by the way. Like the team or people that has kept your .com online, and especially as let's call it like the previous generation of tech native companies, those people had to like basically learn a lot of institutional knowledge around how to keep a .com working, how to scale it, mm-hmm. how to deal with like unexpected traffic spikes or attacks. Mm-hmm. And typically they developed a lot of like social capital inside the company because they're the people, like if you don't have them, you don't have a business. Mm-hmm. And that's the awesome thing about the business that we're in, right? Like at the end of the day, we're just facilitating and accelerating digital transformation. Mm-hmm. And nowadays your .com ends up being more important than perhaps the 200-year-old sort of like brick and mortar institution that you've been known for, whether you're a bank mm-hmm. or a healthcare institution or a fashion brand in Paris. Mm-hmm. Your .com is now increasingly becoming sort of like your fundamental like heartbeat in the market. So in order to keep that online, you needed to create all those like sort of like internal teams. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, you can actually hire an application engineer. They learned Next.js or another framework that they like. And this is an important word too, is they love it, right? Like we create frameworks and integrate frameworks that developers have a great experience with. And then when it comes to the deployment time, we automate everything.
That's extremely important. Like, so while building Prismic, we had a lot of these kind of roadblocks and, milestones of we need to understand how to modernize our infrastructure. And it's not easy because there are many assumptions and many things that appear odd at the beginning, but they are so good. Like, for instance, one of the things that at some point we moved all our rendering. So we render JSON, right? So we get some data in some format and we have on the fly to transform it into the API format. And we do it for certain reasons. And we wanted to scale it more because we started having like, big customers that have, huge e-commerces that are hitting our API. And instead of starting to build different instances, I was like, no, we can do that without multiplying the instances of that. We need to find a way. And actually, so we came up with, let's use lambdas and all of that. And the team was like, yeah, but lambdas are very limited on the timeout and at the payload. And the fact that they have to understand that this limitation is the good thing. Is
That's
that
right.
basically what they tell you, if you can manage that your service consumes only that, we can scale it forever.
That's right.
But that's a point that you need to understand, because before it would look like a limitation. The one thing that they will
That's
want to
right.
do is to find a Lambda that has more instances
That's right.
than what what AWS gives you, or more timeout. But no, you should not hack this. Actually, it's done by a decision. It's not a limit. It's done because if you do that, then they can scale it. But the same thing can happen at the front, right? So you're doing some kind of experience by being knowledgeable about the framework. You can make these kind of decisions.
That's right.
For the user, so that they don't have to care about, okay, how will it scale at some point, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for front end, it's really interesting because typically the engineers that are working on the front end of an application, they're closer to the design, both in interest and also tactically. Like the work that they do is around the pixels, it's around the presentation layer.
Mm-hmm.
And in spirit, those people are the ones that spend more time talking to designers, sometimes designing themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's an interesting asymmetry that we found in the market, is that there's a lot of alpha in, we're almost like arming the rebels. We're saying like, hey, like you could never deploy or manage infrastructure in the past. You needed like a degree in AWS and DevOps and, like site reliability engineering.
Yeah.
Now you're actually going all the way, and then you're deploying in a way that actually surpasses what the DIY way could do in many cases, right? Like the scale that we provide.
I like the claim. It's good. It's good.
I mean, the scale that we provide is frankly enormous.
Can you give me concrete cases of something that a front end is going to do in these kind of modern apps today that you optimize more than if you do it yourself and
Yeah,
go
for
for
sure.
like the normal architecture? Because
Yeah.
I really like this kind of architecture concept, but I'd like to make it very concrete. Like for
sure.
these people that do front end, give me a case where you tell this is hard to scale,
Yeah.
and this is why it's going to be able to scale.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time on Twitter, so I'll give you one. I'll give you a couple anecdotes that are like super fresh in my mind. One just from yesterday, someone tweeted at me saying like, they sent me a screenshot of our dashboard and said like, holy crap, I just made a really bad push that brought down our business. And because of Vercel's instant rollback capability, I was able to revert it in less than a second. To revert a global workload atomically in less than a second is almost impossible when you're using more stateful, server-oriented infrastructure. And typically, it's a big deal. It's an incident that gets filed, and the systems team needs to get brought in, and like it's a huge ordeal. And again, it's the lifeblood of your company. So that's an example of, we created infrastructure that has a certain speed that really speaks to our audience. Like if you make a mistake, it goes unpunished. Keep moving fast. Another example that is very, very hard to attain in traditional setups that is actually quite related to this is a functionality that the inspiration for is also very much rooted in what we know about frameworks. And this feature is called SKU protection. So one of the things that we tell companies that's awesome at Vercel is that you're going to be able to deploy more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes talk to the largest companies in the world in terms of like brand value and brand awareness, like our moms would know about it, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell me, we deploy once a quarter, or we deploy a couple times a quarter.
Not surprised.
And by the way, not the quarter of Black Friday, because that's like the code freeze quarter.
Oh man, I had
So imagine some of the best companies in the world saying to you that they're basically terrified of shipping software.
Yeah.
And we come in and we say, you can ship every hour, every day,
Mm-hmm.
every minute. In practice, it's so they get a little bit of culture shock, so they deploy once a week or a couple times a week.
You already brought them to that, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But basically, we built infrastructure that allows you to deploy every second of every day. And when you deploy so frequently, the inspiration here is like the big co's, right? Like Google, Meta, etc. They're just constantly shipping new software. You need to build a technology that ensures that you're not disrupting the people that are loading an experience on their phones at that very moment. So Vercel is able to keep multiple versions of the application running concurrently, such that nobody's sessions are interrupted. And this is, imagine like you have a big sale going on and you have to ship a critical fix because something is going wrong. And you have a lot of people on the checkout phase. We cannot disrupt the front-end connectivity, whether it's a server action or API endpoint or whatever it is, or even just loading the JS, CSS, and image assets correctly for that version of the application. We cannot disrupt that. Because of our underlying serverless infrastructure, we're able to keep multiple versions of the application running. And this is just like a subtle thing that, again, most of our customers, maybe they'll find out about it when they're like buying the software because we tell them about it or we market it and whatever. But for the most part, they don't have to worry about it. And if they didn't have Vercel, like they would literally be losing money silently.
So it makes me think of, it's a very good point, and it's extremely to get right. Hard. It's extremely hard to get right. And it reminds me of something that you brought up earlier when we were talking and about product-led growth and how a lot of the growth of Vercel happens because you have a good product. And actually it's my belief also with Prismic is like, I strongly believe, I mean, of course you can go really far with sales driven and all that.
That's right.
I'm not criticizing that. And I can inspire a lot from that. Well, let's not go into that. But I strongly believe in just give a good product to a community. Of course, you need to talk about it well and you need to market it well, all of that, but you need to have a good product. And there is some famous video of Steve Jobs actually, who's saying you cannot sell experience. You cannot sell experience. You cannot tell, hey, I give you a good experience. It's more like experience it.
It's so funny. It's so funny because over time I've become less landing page sort of oriented. And the reason is that modern software products can be experienced directly, to your point. Yeah. In fact, I think a lot of startups follow what Apple does, sometimes blindly, sometimes not so blindly, because there's very good things to take from Apple as well. Like, let's not kid ourselves. And one of the things I think people have blindly followed is that Apple creates these really flashy landing pages. I remember always like the AirPods landing page was like freaking like phenomenal. Like I'm still like, I remember every pixel. I even reverse engineered it and it was like super fun. But that makes sense for a hardware product that you cannot experience. If you think about it, their obsession is with the actual experience. That's why the Apple Store is designed the way it is. It's a bunch of tables where you can go and grab the product. It seems like
they designed the you know, I in one of the stores here at Opera, the conditioner is under the table. When you come close to the table, it feels cool.
Oh, that's
like
awesome.
Literally.
That's awesome.
It is cool in that spot. Like,
and that's experience.
They went so far into the experience of like, they want to put you in this comfortable place where you can experience their product in the best way.
Yeah.
And actually, one of, when we were looking at analytics, and one of the best channels or paths for our users when they're coming to Prismic to buy, we have something, try it out, which actually you don't need to sign up. You don't need to do anything. Just you click and you experience. That's awesome. Go build a page with Prismic, and you have right away, click, product, and you start building the page. Brilliant. And that's the best paths we have because people can experience it, because you can tell so much. I think the landing page is more about shaping a perspective. Like you guys, you say.
That's right.
You know, build and ship. That's right. All what we're about. Now, everything you see afterwards, just interpret it from that perspective.
And you need landing pages. But my point is actually what you just touched on, which is that make sure that you're not getting in the way of facilitating that experience. That you delay it so much with like endless scrolling, and you're not really having the right call to actions. Because maybe the key call to action that I will invest my sort of like landing page budget towards is like, get them into the demo, get them to try out maybe a small version of the product that is directly embedded in that page, or get them to sign up and try it out for themselves, and like maybe invest more of your product capital into a completely streamlined onboarding experience.
Yeah.
So that you actually get to try the product.
Yeah, experience. And that's why I think that the way you guys went about it is, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of like, go ahead, try it.
Yeah.
And I like that. So and we talked a little bit about competitors, and you're talking about like, okay, this is we are the front end cloud, okay. And then I was like, okay, but guess what? Well, maybe it's rewarding to see like big actors are trying to offer solutions that in the same area of what
right.
Vercel is doing. Like even AWS is like launching Amplify, and there are many others. And from one side, you can see like, okay, well, we did something good there because everyone else is trying to do what we're doing.
All the big clouds
is it dangerous for you? Do you see it as a threat?
I don't, because I really believe in the power of open source. And to your point earlier about why I think it all plays in our favor is open source just grows the size of the pie. When people see that AWS advertises support for Next.js, that Google Cloud advertises support for Next.js, then it reaffirms that idea of like Next.js is the standard. It's inevitable. When you hear, that's why I always promote Next.js products regardless of whether they're hosted. I'm very proud to say like, oh, the largest website in China uses Next.js. Oh, ChatGPT uses Next.js. It doesn't matter where they're hosted, because I know that Next.js becoming the standard is so powerful. It benefits everybody. And to your point, the clouds will do things there, but the clouds are always thinking very generically, right? Like AWS has a service called CloudFront that is similar. If you zoom out, it's similar to how our Vercel Edge network works. They both have this CDN component, globally distributed, etc. But ours was sort of conceived, designed, and built for these front-end frameworks.
Not only for the front-end framework, for the front-end developer, I would say, because you support more frameworks than just Next.js, right?
Exactly. And the developer experience is actually a great point. Like one of the things that I'm very proud about our global CDN is just how fast it is. I mentioned earlier that you can roll back in under a second. You can deploy security rules in 300 milliseconds. You can say, oh, I'm noticing a spike of traffic coming from this country or this ASN or this JA4 signature. I want to mitigate it. We can apply rules in real time. We conceived something that matched the expectations of speed of a front-end developer. But we applied it to the design of infrastructure.
Right.
Whereas, and I haven't tried some of the competitor products like the more general CDNs in a while, but like the purges of the CDN are slow. Sometimes they're very erratic. I was hearing a customer call the other day where the customer was complaining that sometimes it takes an hour and it's unreliable for a competitor. And by the way, I'm going to say competitor in quotes because we don't really compete directly with more of the legacy CDNs, but they were saying my current CDN offering that doesn't know anything about my origin. They're like completely decoupled.
Yeah.
I think we're going to look back on this as like a really bad engineering practice. Kind of like, I think what Apple has done to vertically integrate software and hardware is sort of the inspiration for a lot of what we do. But when you look at like, okay, so I have this origin, I have this CDN, I have this CMS over here, and then the CMS tells me that the content has changed. So, okay, so my app tells the CDN, and then the CDN sometimes changes the content and sometimes doesn't. Like the fact that people are struggling with that still in 2024 at the largest scales, it was mind-boggling to me because fundamentally we're just trying to change content on sites. And you would think that that's a solved problem.
But you need a very solid architecture to make sure. Because like if you don't have in the request, no, in the response header, anything that tells you which content you're, or in the request, some way to say like, I want the fresh content or anything like that, then you cannot guarantee. It's very hard to guarantee. And that's why, like, for instance, since the beginning, for us, we actually host different versions of the content simultaneously.
Right.
And you have them, and they still keep there. Like at some point, we
Like
kill
the
it.
SKU protection thing we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. So you have it around, and at some point, you still hit that because the other is not ready.
That's
When is it ready? You start hitting the new one.
That's right.
And you need to have them simultaneously.
But again, working backwards from the user expectation, right? Like I go to the Prismic backend and I change my content, I press save. Within a second, no matter where I am in the world, I should be able to go to my customer website and see the fresh content, right? And funny enough, or sadly enough, customers are still struggling. And again, that happens when you're sort of assembling all these disjointed pieces. And I think, frankly, like there is a perpetuity to sort of oversimplifying some problems. Like now to sort of make it sound a little bit more optimistic, I do think that this is fundamentally a miracle that a company can push content that worldwide becomes accessible to basically every human being on the planet if they had the capacity to reach them, right? And yeah, it's hard. It's hard because it involves the entire world. It involves a lot of infrastructure. It involves software that can fail at any given time. But we're here to help them sort of overcome all those difficulties. And I think customers now have that choice of, frankly, this is a premium product. If you look at it like dollar by dollar, it is a premium product. But you have to also consider all of the time and all of the pitfalls that product is overcoming for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important point because often you get people of comparing prices and putting it in the grid and oftentimes it's like how long it will cost you to implement it. Like, just did you do the estimation? Did you go into like an estimation exercise of if you have to implement these things, do you care about them? Yes.
That's right.
Okay, go ahead, see how much of your engineers with a probability of failure and success, put it also in that estimation. You will see that you are saving a lot of money actually by doing that. But people don't do that, and they start, and that's the thing we brought about the sales-driven company is they promise whatever they want. They can copy your content and put in their website. It's like we are that, and yes, they can do it. But guess what? Who can deliver? And eventually, people will see. Right? There's like when you got these aluminum Macs and everyone was hype about them, and then several companies actually went into aluminum to say like, oh yeah, we can do this kind of a premium product, and then you open it and you're so deceived by the experience that's right. It only plays to the point of Apple at that point, right?
Yeah, it goes back to that vertical integration. I think you have to, it's the Allen Kay thing. It goes beyond Apple, is that if you really care about your software, building your hardware, I think we are trying to do the cloud version of that. If you really care about the developer experience, you must build the matching infrastructure. We now have given this a fancy name. We call it framework-defined infrastructure, right? Like we get in the framework in the application, we output the infrastructure. But that infrastructure that we create has also been so optimized and purpose-built for the kinds of applications and needs that our customers have. Another example, you were talking about AI. AI applications have this need to stream content.
Yeah.
So we had to build a lot of optimized infrastructure for streaming. And streaming has always been important, especially for like very high-end e-commerce, where any given request is touching a bunch of backends for like personalization and customer reviews and content like Prismic, and it's also getting like the real-time stock, but it's also getting the shipping estimate or the tax estimate, like all these things. Like, again, very easy to oversimplify just how mind-bogglingly complex international e-commerce is. So you need a very sophisticated rendering approach that streams content as it becomes available. Meaning, if a backend responds, I can start flushing parts of the experience. And the inspiration for this is Amazon.com. When you go to Amazon.com, it feels really fast in the initial page load. And the reason for that is that they're actually streaming the top part of the page really quickly. And the rest is sort of more lazy. So we're building technology for that. And then GenAI happened. And guess what? Like every single product in the AI space involves streaming in some fashion. Sometimes very extreme forms because the AIs are so slow to think. And so we had that infra already built, and the other piece was that it was so easy to use. So it was kind of like the perfect.
It's funny how, we've been doing something, right? And you had a story, and you were like building for that story of Vercel. We had a story about Prismic, what we wanted to be and all. And then GenAI happened.
Yeah.
Not only that, it like AI appeared and became more useful, it just like it became very available. This the thing of with a generic model is that you can apply it to anything. You don't have to train your own models, at least as an experimentation. Maybe at some point you say, like, this is working so well, let me tune or even build train my own model. But at least it makes that technology available to everyone. And now, with very short time, you had to update your vision to, okay, what does it mean for AI? What kind of things I was already working on that are so good for AI? And you might be lucky, or you might not be lucky in this story, because you might be going in the wrong in the wrong direction. So I would like to focus on answering this question, and I will answer it for myself on the Prismic side. I would like you to start with, okay, what was the story?
Yeah.
And then how did you stop and look at it? And what is the story after with GenAI, with the availability of GenAI?
Yeah, for sure. I've always been interested in AI because my obsession has always been with developer experience. And when I first started trying out things like Copilot, where, especially for myself as a CEO, I don't code every day, but I do have a lot of ideas for trying out our products that I want to code. And I was finding myself really benefiting from Copilot and AIs that sort of auto-completed. In fact, I had myself been obsessed with this idea of like auto-completion for a long time. And my interest in AI was actually very authentic because I was like, okay, like I'm using it, and in my mind, it's already changed the way I work. So I had a very deep-rooted conviction that AI was going to change how we worked. At the same time, when you have a company, you have to stay focused, and you have to be, again, very authentic,
of course,
to your customer and your audience. So you can't be doing, front end one day and the next day it's like, you know what, I'm going to create microphones, and here's a Vercel microphone. So we had an internal.
You could, but yes, you confuse people. You don't even understand who you are anymore.
Exactly. Like, is my heart in it, right? Kind of thing. So the opportunity that I saw was a lot of people actually come to me and ask me, like, how do you all create, and you were asking about it even before the conversation, how do you all create such a polished UI, polished brand? Like, how do you make it look so good, etc.? And the answer is like, well, there are no shortcuts. It's a lot of hard work, but we do have sort of a set of practices and patterns of what makes for a great UI. In fact, I have a lot of those in my head. I know how to pattern match against it when we hire. I know how to critique and give feedback to products that people build inside Vercel and even outside Vercel. And over time, I've started realizing that like all those patterns are repetitive. What makes something look clean, what makes something look Apple-esque, whatever, like that's a statistical imprint in your brain that says like, okay, that's what a good UI looks like. And of course, there's going to be variations over time. But fundamentally, a good front end needs to have a statistical grounding into something that's already familiar.
Right.
Otherwise, each new UI would be such a huge cognitive effort to parse through.
Right.
So we decided, okay, could we create a Copilot or a ChatGPT for the front-end engineer? And that's how we came up with this idea for V0, which is basically like text to front-end. And is the easiest way, even for a non-engineer, to now start creating things that basically approach a level of quality and completion that is essentially what a front-end engineer that has spent many years refining their craft would give you. And we call it specifically V0 because we don't want to like mislead the market
expectations.
with a narrative of like, like you no longer need engineers. In fact, I think you need engineers more than ever before, but we can save a lot of time.
So this is pretty good. So I want to make it crystal clear. Pre V0, in one sentence, what was Vercel?
I mean, still before and after the front-end cloud, but not AI. I guess it wasn't like an AI-powered platform, I would say.
Okay, so what's the value proposition before?
Value proposition, the mission has always been to enable the world to ship the best products.
Okay.
So
you said
the tools, the infrastructure, everything you need to ship amazing experiences.
And fast.
Yes.
Right? Did that change? How V0 is contributing to that? That's what I'm interested in.
A catalyst. I think AI will help us ship way faster. And I think AI will help us learn. Going back to that iteration velocity, going back to there's just so many unknowns, AI will basically precede a lot of the things that otherwise you would have learned the hard way.
So tell me if that's what you mean. V0 is contributing in the workflow, in the value proposition that you're suggesting, and that you get there quicker.
That's right.
In the first iteration.
That's
you
right.
get into the first iteration quicker. And then Vercel will help you through the other iterations in another way.
That's right.
But that's what V0 is.
And a lot of products are new beginnings every single day, right? Like you're creating new screens.
Yes.
You're creating new pages, you're creating new products,
Right.
You're expanding your platform. I talked to a great company here in Paris the other day that they were walking me through their product. It's currently written in Ember.js, they're migrating it to Next.js. And as they were walking me through the platform, it had like 10 products in there. And they want to have more because they're very successful.
Right.
So every single day there's like a new beginning. Every single day there is a new V0. But we wanted to really come to market with something that we felt was truthful.
Yeah,
that is like AI is not going to ship directly to prod yet. I think one day it will get there, but not yet. And we need to make something in the context of like, let's use the technology to the best of our ability and to the extent that it's productive today.
And I've seen several researchers out there that say that IT budgets are being so restrained for anything that is not enabled with AI, and they're opening budgets for everything because now the appetite is there. People believe that they can go faster, they can be more productive, they can deliver more with AI. But the problem is no one, and very few companies are going to give the ROI.
That's right.
Because you can promise a lot of things. As you said, we actually with a nice test with ChatGPT, you can get some UI out there and it seems very good. But when you start thinking about the idea that I'm pushing this to production, that becomes less impressive actually, because it's for me it's like when you bring an intern into the company, okay, you have children, right? And the first time a child is walking, for instance, or talking, you're so happy. Like, wow, you're walking, right? But guess what? Every human being, I mean, a lot of human beings are walking. And that's impressive at the moment of achievement.
That's
right. But if we talk about the scale, it's not so impressive to do that. So how can we shape what is available by AI, by GenAI today to a benefit for today, not for now, right away. And the fact of shaping V0 in a way like, okay, you have so many V0s every day, and we help you get to that point, and then you can optimize that, you can make it to your way, but just at least we get you with this bootstrap.
Yeah, and there's another metaphor in there with children, which is one of the things that fascinates me always, and it never gets old, is the exponential increase in number of words that a child can utter. So they start struggling to get one word, then there comes a second word, and then a couple of months later it's like 20 words, 1,000 words, a million words. The exponential is always fascinating. And I think there is something to that in AI as well, where we went from like GPT-1 to 2 to 3 to 4, And we are riding a wave, and I think it is important for companies to participate in that, because it's also where the technology is today, but you need to actualize your skills and open your minds so that you can ride that exponential. And that might mean that you have prototypes, or that you use AI internally, or
yes.
But again, like, you have to be careful that it doesn't show up in the product, or doesn't show up to the customer in a way that is not high quality.
To break your promise, you should not break your promise that you gave to your customers, right?
I think Apple the other day did a pretty good job with that.
Very good. That's visions. That's what we talked about the brand. And by the way, I mean, probably it's also your own preferences that you put into your brand, but it's a very bold and sharp brand. It's visible not only in the images and the design that you use, but in how also it translates into the code you ship, the products you have. There is a certain alignment and coherence, and that's important. And the Apple announcement, what I love about it is, like, it has been a few years that they're taking this kind of customer privacy kind of way. And today the promise is, guess what? We can give you GenAI. We can give you a chat GPT, personalized to you, to your stories, to your dreams, to whatever you care about.
Yeah.
But without getting your data and your personal data to someone else. And that promise is, again, they shaping that. They took to their time. And that's the good.
That's right.
People think Apple's are innovators, they're the first to come to market with product. They are not, actually.
That's
they're
right.
not. They've never been the first, maybe. Maybe there's situations. But recently, in the modern history, it has been always, we think, what is Apple?
That's right.
How does Apple think about GenAI? And then they come with a very coherent story, actually, to their customers.
The fact that they're also using the cloud, I think maybe for the first time in this particular way, where, like, because they have to run the models, and the models are huge, they have to use the cloud.
Right? Like, it's not a choice anymore.
It was great. It felt very validating of the thing that I believed in when I started Vercel, because what I always pictured in my mind is the cloud having virtually infinite power, but the device being this, like, little, like, to use a meme, is like the super buff Doge is the cloud, and the little, like, pet doggy, this, like, tiny, is your device. And yes, devices have gotten better and whatnot, but it's very unpredictable how much space they have for data and caches, and how good the internet connectivity is, and how much computing power they have.
The heat,
Yeah, there's all these variables, and I know that it can control the cloud. I know that it can make every condition perfect for your application, and I know that it can reproduce it over time. Something that Vercel has put in a tremendous amount of effort into is our compute is very reproducible. Unlike the sort of, like, shared CPU approaches of some hosting providers, like, Vercel makes it such that the first and 1 billionth customer experience are, like, reproducible. And so, going back to, like, the Apple decision, I think it's validating, because over time, the cloud is the one that will just keep expanding in terms of capability, and the workload will demand it. Ultimately, I think LLMs are sort of the one that, like, kind of, like, broke that. Okay, now it's almost like a point of no return,
right,
in favor of cloud-centric computing.
When GenAI happened, it was the same exercise for us. Like, okay, what is Prismic with that? What are the foundations that we have that help us deliver value to our customers in the way that we believe? And since forever, like, Prismic, since the beginning, Prismic was very much about we give, like, instead of building pages, build sections, slices. Because if you have a library of 30, 40, we have customers, like, I have 60 slices. Then the marketing team could mix and match these to produce so many pages, right? And that was the promise, is that focus on building reusable sections. And it comes also, as you say, vertically optimized, because also in the framework in Next, they are components, and we can take advantage of the fact that they are components down in the stack. And that was the whole idea. And it was very appealing for the marketing team, the top of the stack, of like, okay, so I can visually, use a section, put it there, write down, and then compose my page in this way. And then GenAI happened, and was like, okay, what's the story with that?
That's right. I mean, I can think of many.
Oh, well, give me about that, and I will tell you whether you get it right.
I think for one, that's very clear to me is content is something that is fundamentally very experimental in my head. Like, I don't know sometimes what content will perform best, especially in this world of like social media and Twitter views and YouTube and TikTok. Like, there's this constant feedback loop, and there's a need for actualization.
Yeah.
One day the market cares about AI. In 2 weeks they care about something else.
Yes.
And so experimenting with content is really important. I think AI can help be the co-pilot for content creators, right?
Yeah. But there is one problem with that, is that, for any serious company, you don't want to break your brand.
That's right.
You don't want AI to put because
it can never be unleashed directly.
No, the padding is important.
Yeah.
The spacing between characters is important. Every single aspect of the UI is crafted in a way to say this is our brand. And especially with the explosion of GenAI and generated content on the web, you want to appear, you want to be unique, you want people to remember you, right? And building a website with AI and letting AI deploy. So you need some kind of middle ground where you are safe on the brand, but extremely productive on producing pages.
That's right.
And that's what we have. Because who crafts the sections? Developers. They go craft these sections, and they craft them so well, very well designed, optimized. Everything is good about that. But once they are done, we give it to GenAI. So like, create a page for me for this and that. But it's using the sections that they already have. Like, you have a brand, like, I don't know, we have TED, for instance, as a customer, and they have a very unique brand to them, and they have to kind of build a lot of pages. Well, they could go and upload, for instance, some kind of content. It's like, I want a page for that content.
That's right.
Okay, but it's going to be their brand, because these sections that were handcrafted by developers, by agencies, for them. And that mix is important. And that reminds me of, that's what I was Googling. There is, I don't know, Rick Rubin? Rick Rubin is a music producer who doesn't play any instrument, or he didn't do any digital music production. And what he's good at is simply the fact that he can say...
Taste-making.
So eventually, developers and agency are going to be that, to understand what the community wants.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I think AI without the human tastemaker in the loop is not effective today.
No.
So getting a tight feedback loop between, okay, this is an idea, what do you think? This is an idea, what do you think? That's the way that AI can be successful today. And I can imagine it being amazing for content creators. I think even incorporating new ideas that they're not thinking of, right? Like,
exactly.
What are gaps of things that you're not talking about that the market cares about? Or what do others write about in the context of this business that you're not writing about, right? Like,
and we can bring that.
Yeah.
As in, like, because you need to be part of the conversations. That's what marketing is about.
That's right.
Be part of the conversations. And you cannot be everywhere. And we can help marketing by saying, this is an important topic. And we can help you generate an idea of the content, some kind of V0 of the content of the page, and then we can optimize it together. But what you care about is the brand voice. We can get that for you. We can train models for the brand voice. We give you your brand voice, Vercel's brand voice. And we get you the brand design as well, because these sections were optimized by you. They were handcrafted by you. And we deliver the brand experience with GenAI.
That's right.
And you see the story, and probably we're lucky, probably because also, like, a lot when you have strong foundations, you always find opportunities. I remember I was looking at Hasselblad, the camera.
Yes.
I think it was Hasselblad. I'm not sure which one, but probably it is. that they had this modular way of putting the film behind, and you can change it. Basically, you just open it, and then you bring another box, and then digital happened. What they did is just, instead of this box, they put a digital one instead, and it worked. So you can say like, okay, very lucky.
That's right.
But actually, it was very modular in the way there is a very strong foundation in the construction that actually, yeah, there is a little bit of luck, but a lot of also
a lot of thoughtfulness
before.
I think cameras are a really interesting metaphor too, because there's something eternal about the need to capture great moments. And yes, now everyone has a camera in their pocket through their phones. But even those companies have actually done well because they've adapted, right? Like they've focused on like, okay, like what are my true strengths?
Yeah, who am I exactly in this world, right?
Yeah.
And now, like, I think so. We've been doing this for quite some time now, and I know that entrepreneurship and building a company is extremely hard, and there's no one founder that, when you're looking at videos on YouTube and in media, there's no one that doesn't say that it's extremely hard to grow a company. And well, for your side also with open source, which I honestly admire, because I had my take on open source and building a business. It can be hard, and I don't know. I mean, I admire the people that do it, but I'd rather go for SaaS, and you're still on it. But what I want today is to go into that kind of journey of entrepreneurship, okay, of yours, and I would like to comment on it as well. And I want you to look at it from your current self, looking at your past self, and telling it, it's okay. You don't have to worry about that much, or that was good. And I want it to be balanced, so not only the good stuff. Like, just go into these kind of things, beliefs that were very strong, and then you understood like it's okay, and that's not something you have to think too much about.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, because I have now 8 years of data points to look back on, and I think it's always interesting to reflect on like, what are the things that I was like worried about that it was just pointless worry. I think from time to time, maybe I thought more about competitors than I should have.
Well, I did the same. I brought it up here, right?
Yeah. In a way that it didn't create a dysfunction, but every time I find myself thinking about a competitor, it's now, I have a tool now, which is I force myself to think about a customer instead. So it's almost like cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's a bad thought pattern. A good thought pattern is thinking about customers, celebrating customers, asking customers like, are you doing well? Do you need my help? How can I build a better platform for you?
Okay, but I would like to be concrete here. And you're on a sales call for a company that we really want to have. And then they bring us the name of the computer. It's like, oh yeah, but we really like what they do. You have to think about the computer. So how do you go about this side of it?
I always try to, again, even then I use the same tool. I make it about myself. Depending on who the company is, how big it is, I might tell them about our values and how they've differed over time. Look, this is who I am, and this is how I perceive who they are. As opposed to being like, but wait, like if you do WRK, you're gonna see that I have like 200 milliseconds over here and they have 250 over there. Like, I think the lesson there has been about like, I don't think about them that much. I know who they are, and I know who I am, and I try to present that as candidly as possible. And by the way, like going back to like mistakes, maybe like in the past, I maybe a younger self would have been more aggressive about like, especially when I know that I have the upper hand on some technological thing or whatever. Like, I was probably
too shy, right, to kind of go and say like, I got this better than anyone else.
Yeah, but I think ultimately the best thing that you can communicate is that self-assuredness that is not rooted in like, oh, that like API or whatever. It's like, no, it's like, we're just different ultimately. And by the way, like, I don't have to win every single deal. I don't have to partner with everybody. I want to partner with the best companies in the world.
I would say with the most aligned ones. I mean, there is some kind of learning curve to people to be aligned. My view on this is Like, look at the CMS. So how many CMSs out there? Like hosting companies, so many. Like it's endless. And then we get often with this conversation about computers and stuff. And I said, like, for us, content is experience. That's all. For others, content is data, content is this and that. And if you believe content is data and database, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah. It's like, cool. Is it a utility or is it a differentiator? Actually, I like this framework because when I think about the companies that I want to partner with that make me proud about, oh, wow, they use Vercel, is the companies that care deeply about their customer experience. So it's awesome brands, and actually they want to use technology to propel themselves. Technology for them is not a checkbox of like, okay, now I finally have I have a website, cool, check, move on to the next thing. Like, it's companies that want to go on this journey with us to really transcend and leave a fingerprint online. And again, like, I think
leave a fingerprint, and that these customers, I want to fight for them. I want this. Like when I go in a call, and it's like, I'm going to deliver this for you because I care about you. It's more than that. It's not that I'm selling. It's like I'm very happy to have you on board. Actually,
that's right.
Yeah,
less is more. I think that's the other big lesson. And I that one was probably pretty painful because we took the product in. Took is a loaded word because the product started out very broad. It's like deploy anything, anywhere. And what we realized, and I've now spoken at length about the merits of framework-defined infrastructure and carving out a niche, because I called the front-end cloud a niche. It's actually awesome. It's like a hack because every company in the world needs a front-end. So how can it be a niche? Well, it's a niche insofar, for a lot of companies, it's an afterthought. And not everybody thinks that they have to start building the experience front end first, and not every company uses a modern web framework like Next.js or Svelte. So it is a niche, and I think there's a lot of power in identifying those quote unquote niches that almost seem like these contradictions. And I think I would have saved myself from a lot of pain had I realized earlier that less is more.
Yeah.
With the product surface.
And you hear it. Everyone tells you. It's just like it's hard to perceive it when you're doing the stuff. Everyone said like less. And actually, it has helped us a lot over the years to look at, let's do less. Okay, like there's so many things that, like for instance, when you're configuring your CMS, developers want so many options in the forms,
That's right.
But when you're shaping the forms, you're shaping the marketer experience in the same time. And giving many options there is going to confuse the marketing person. And we have to say no to a lot of things that actually make sense for a developer. But say we cannot do that for the marketing person. Less. We do less.
Yeah.
Because less is more for that person. And less is more simplicity. And also to touch the point that about the front end, and everyone has a front end. I like this. Was an interview with Jeff Bezos, who was saying about innovation. Like everyone tries to bring big ideas, new ideas, and innovation. And what he was thinking is that he would look at something that will not move.
That's right.
In the coming 10 or 20 years.
1,000 years.
Right. And front end.
Yes.
Websites. You're going to have these. You have what we say today is that we had websites for how long since the web, and we're going to have websites for the end of the world. And even if people sometimes try to experiment with how can they do stuff or conversational, no, website, because there is a reason why they exist. They're going to exist in the future. And that's why, for instance, by going, not broader, but actually like narrower, is that we say, well, guess what? We're not going to name features groups. We can name them cards, buttons, navigation. We should go with the web vocabulary because it's going to be there forever.
That's right.
And we should not go in the abstract way. And that's also that kind of narrow it down. It's okay. That's actually better than being broad.
Yeah. And the other thing that I didn't know is enterprises tend to really want to excel in a specific areas. So it's very rare that, and I mean, the statistics back it, right? Like they buy tenths of thousands of pieces of software. to support a modern enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of a specialization actually resonates a lot with enterprise, even though like we typically see them as like slower moving and outdated and whatever. That's only because of the mass, the gravity that they have. They have to move, but once they make a decision, it's typically a very thoughtful one. And if they say, well, like my website is really slow right now. So for example, we closed a deal recently with a very large financial services company.
Okay.
And they said, our website sucks right now. Like it's very slow. It has all these problems. We're not updating the content as much as we want to. We're not launching products as fast as we want to. They made a decision to invest in what we just called a niche, right? It's like, okay, we need a front-end cloud to solve this. And I think my perception when I started this years ago is like, well, maybe enterprise will just buy very fundamental primitives, assemble everything themselves, and go after lowest common denominator solutions. In reality, once there is a market recognition of the category, and that this is the thing that actually took us the most time, now there's just a gravitas towards like, I just want best of breed. And that's a different conversation that I have sometimes with individual developers, where they're more about like, I don't know, like, can I just make it work, period? As opposed to like, I want to maximize and optimize every single aspect of the experience. So you kind of start, like, you have to start speaking to like two different worlds of like, okay, what is the thing that's going to get you by? And what is the thing that's like really going to excel? And how can I bring this world down and make it accessible to everybody?
Yeah. So what you're saying is with enterprise, of course, in the beginning they're reluctant on new technology, but once that is identified as a category, then they go and purchase it because they believe that
they go all in.
Because that's the decision of like, we're going into that kind of, let's say, front-end experience.
That's right.
And we're going to buy the tools for the front-end experience.
That's right.
And that's the one.
That's right. But in the beginning, until that is recognized as a need, you have no chance. So it's almost like a catch-22.
And yeah, okay, I see very well. Well, there's so much that we can talk about, Guillermo, and we have to leave something for maybe in 3 years.
That's right.
that we meet again. What is, so let's end it with some kind of perspective, okay? And a bit crazy, okay? So what is the worst thing or the best thing or both that could happen, with GenAI if it developed very quickly? What are your biggest fears and biggest hopes with GenAI? And globally, you don't have to talk about applications and web, like something.
I'll start with best. I think best, and we're seeing this with V0, is that it's going to give tools to people to do things that are magical to them that they couldn't do before. Like simply like the accessibility to technology was not there specifically around software engineering. Software engineering was considered, and I'm already using was, to be this like unattainable skill. Even the job market is starting to sort of react and respond to this, right? Like to be a software engineer at Google meant that you were one of the few people in the world that could manipulate this like magic substrate of code and like will it into existence and create products out of it, etc. And that superpower will continue to be there. And the best software engineers in the world are still going to be sort of, this like really special people that everybody wants to hire, etc. But there's going to be a lot more software engineers. And that's really exciting because there's going to be more competition, more opportunities, more applications. Sometimes there will be no opportunity for a market to create an application for a certain niche or for a very specific need. And again, we'd go to like more general purpose solutions, like we would use Excel or Word.
Right.
I think we've all had that experience with like, we see some abusive example of an Excel spreadsheet. It's like, you're like, wait a second, like what do you just do, right? Okay. That's an app. And so I think instead of like worrying about whether AI will take my job, I think AI will create a lot of jobs and actually even create more differentiation between skill sets. Like there will be the people that like really understand every layer of the stack. And there's people that can harness AI to create new products, as opposed to people that are like actually more dependent on AI. So there's like a supply chain to it. So very optimistic and very positive about the effects of AI there. I think the AI will transform the web ultimately for the better. But like in every generation of technology, there will be like winners and losers, right? And I think companies will need to adapt very quickly.
Yes.
I already heard from a website owner that they're so sophisticated with their analytics that they have so much sensitivity to Google's changes that they already noticed that AI overviews had an impact on their traffic.
Yeah.
But that probably meant, if I'm that person, and I know that this is true for this particular business, I should have seen that coming, right? Like, it's not that AI overviews on Google just appeared one day out of the blue. People have been talking about it for at least 2 years. And even before then, Google has been experimenting with embedding the answer directly in the search result page
Absolutely.
for quite a while.
Yeah, quite a while. So there's no surprise there, right?
It's not like, oh, Google, you got me this time. Like, you should have seen that coming. And again, like, what you need there is that adaptability. And only software can enable. It's like software is like can be your worst enemy or your biggest enabler. Because now that you've established yourself in the market, you have a following. I was actually talking to a customer the other day who's explained to me they have a content business, but 1% of their visitors are these whales that consume endless amount of content that they put out. They just spend all their day on their website. So now what they're doing is, instead of like crying about AI overviews or whatever, they're building products for that 1%, which is actually a huge number, that love that particular brand, trust their journalistic integrity, are just overall fans. And now they have like, they're building software. They're not building like more news or more content or more, they're actually building specific applications for those people. And maybe it even takes a form of personalized content for those people.
Oh man, you're touching to that point.
So you have to like really be able to be dynamic, and I mean, and not just in the technology sense, but as a business in how you respond to this ever-changing market.
Right.
So that to me is like all positive stuff. And the best.
Yeah, very, very much so. And like, if you know, the capacity of generating more stuff, more content, more pages, more blog posts, it's there. It's already there. And there are a lot of people that are experimenting with like taking off like the SEO of a very big company with AI, and they succeeded. Now, Google eventually penalized them, but it's possible technologically to do it. But I see like when you go to certain websites, they're so huge, and it shows a mature company that is taking about their story from a lot of different perspectives, very personalized. Right. You talk about personalized and extremely personalized to everything that you might, every project, every use case, every type of profile of industry or user, and all of that. It's a very wide website.
Yeah.
But that was not available for smaller companies. It's huge. It's a lot of work. But today it is actually. It is, because you can bring your narrative, and there is the market data, and with the combination of two, and actually it's not extremely hard. You know, it's a bit of RAG with a little bit of GenAI, and you can get it there. Yeah, so super accessible. The personalization, the width of the website, the depth of the website, all of that is possible today, and it's possible. So you need to already jump into that today. That's right. It's not for the future. It's already now.
Also, on content velocity, there's this term that I've been using, which is frontier content. So what's happening today with LLMs is that they're training on all available knowledge, and the thirst for knowledge and data is just increasing and relentless. So let's say that you had content explaining, I gave this example when I presented this idea of frontier content. Let's say that you wanted to attract traffic to your website and you're a hosting company. So you're like, you know what? Let's create some content about HTTP2. It's a thing that people are intrigued about, whatever. Like, let's just explain it.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, some people call it like growth marketing, whatever. That approach of just creating content that explains concepts that the AI already knows and is not at the frontier will give you diminishing results. But conversely, content that is completely novel, that the AI has not yet been trained on, and that is so unique that it's likely that people will arrive to it because it's so special that it'll actually attract a disproportionate amount of traffic. It's like it can be a very specific point of view. It can be a lived experience. It can be new data.
It's also about related, like it should not be dull. It should not be like, okay, this is
That's right.
this.
It has to be
a preference in it, or a taste, or something about it. Like 100%. That's unique. And that's why we believe, we talked about it, we believe so much in strong brands, because with the content velocity, you need brand, you need taste, you need to appeal to some people that are aligned with you.
A point of view.
And that's a point of view. And that's our story. It's like the point of view is what matters the most in this kind of world, because everything is available. There it is. Now,
that's right.
Yeah.
And I think, interestingly, factual content that is not at the frontier will be subsumed by generative responses, right? Like, so if I want to ask, like, how does multiplexing of streams work in HTTP2? I might not go to any website. I might just get the answer directly from the AI, right?
Yeah.
But actually, there might be depth to that topic. There might be something new to that topic. There might be a benchmark about that topic. And like, then you start actually peeling the layers, and then you find yourself with like more internet and more traffic. And so I think it's going to be, again, it's going to change the sorting algorithm of content. It's going to change how companies need to produce it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to your point earlier, the internet will really be, I think people underestimate to the extent that things will not change, in the sense of like the importance of the web will only continue to increase, but the way that people present themselves on the web is going to change dramatically.
Yes. Yeah.
You see this with the emergence of new winners like Perplexity.
Yeah.
Like new types of aggregators of content. But overall, the eternal place of the web browser remains undisputed, or even more relevant in this world.
Of course, way more relevant than ever before. Well, Guillermo, thank you very much for this visit, for this chat. Well,
good to see
you. Maybe probably in 3 years, we talk about how things go.
For sure.
And if you're interested in building a modern front end for your website with Vercel, Next, and Prismic, please watch this full course that we did for you. It's pretty fun and a lot of amazing animations. So follow the link. Thank you for watching.